Art. Hello, dear colleagues. Hello, everybody who can see us. My name is Vitalii Martyniuk. I am the Executive Director of the Global Studies Center Strategy 21, and we are launching the roundtable challenges and threats to the Black Sea region, which is crowning our project that we have been implementing within a year, as supported by the Black Sea Trust for Regional Cooperation. And we're going to present our deliverables, not just of the center, but also of the experts task force participating here in the event. And we will discuss the problematics of the security situation in the Black Sea region. So, Mr. Mykhailo Gonchar, President of the Center for Global Studies Strategy 21, the welcoming word. Thank you, Vitalii. Hello, everybody. He's saying greetings in the languages of the participants. Our roundtable is really interesting, and besides the greetings to all the participants, I would like to express my gratitude to Monica Pasicaro for the cooperation with Black Sea Trust for regional cooperation within the framework of this project. And I would like to go over to a number of introductory impulses, and I think that the colleagues shall go into detail on this. In this case, when we are going back to the challenges in the Black Sea region, undoubtedly, as of July 2020, we cannot but focus on the negative dynamics. We can see very clearly that this activity aims at creating and escalating tensions in the region caused by the Russian Federation. And in principle, this is not big news, but recently the drills that have just been completed, the traditional drills, Sea Breeze 2020, have demonstrated that Russia has a serious intention to act more brutally, more boldly, and more cynically. And in this context, we need to stress that, in essence, the oversea and the waters of the Black Sea is under the very attentive control of the Russian Federation. And on this scheme, you can see the manner of hydroacoustic control, which has been described by our publication in the Black Sea Security and the finalization of the gas pipeline Turkish flow has allowed Russia and enabled Russia to crown the system of monitoring of underwater space. And this waters are controlled by Russia. And the same will happen in the Baltic Sea in case Russia finishes its activities. It will in terms of to the United States. And another deliverable of Seabreeze 2020 is the effect of the attempt to impose control. One moment. Or to demonstrate to the alliance, to the NATO, who controls the Black Sea even during the NATO drills. We are aware that a similar phenomenon took place last year during the Seabreeze 2020, but it was not that discreet. So it's the first time this year that Russia is acting so boldly. And in this context, I would like to draw your attention that the radio communication of the bodyguards of the Russian Federation affected a Spanish ship during its transition to the drill area. And I would like to show you 5 seconds of recording, which demonstrates what the bodyguard ship was saying, addressing the Spanish ship. Low quality, unfortunately. I demand that you leave the non-navigable area, because in this area, artillery drills, artillery shootings will be conducted. We're not responsible for the consequences, and you are trespassing the exclusive economic zone of the Russian Federation. That's what it looks like. That's the manner the Russian Federation was using its bodyguard ship to push out the drill of the Russian Federation, which is not corresponding to the reality. And Russia is at this moment. And this action is provocative because this is exclusive economic zone of Ukraine. And this is demonstrating that Russia is proceeding the pace of escalation. And we need to join our effort with the partners in the Black Sea and also in the alliance to counteract, because next year the situation can aggravate. This is really a mocking of the alliance, and I would like to stress on that, and I would like to wish every success to our discussion. Thank you, Mr. Mykhailo. And I give the floor for the welcoming word to Mrs. Monica Prisekario.
Thank you, Vitalii, and thank you, Mykhailo, for this introduction, and thank you for inviting me to this meeting. As you said, we have a contribution as Black Sea Trust for Regional Cooperation, so we funded this project. And just to present ourselves quickly, maybe for the participants, not necessarily for the guests. So we are a grant-making initiative, which was funded in 2007 by German Marshall Fund with the support of different governments, USAID, but also other governments, and the European Union also. And I'm really happy, actually, that I can be part of this discussion, because we can see live, the results of our project. I was looking back at your project, and actually you're saying that, and when you wrote the proposal, when you sent the proposal, you're saying that your aim is a permanent supervision of what is happening in the Black Sea region. And actually what Mr. Gonchar was saying, Mykhailo was saying, it's like, this is a topic that should be continuously on the agenda of the Black Sea countries. And it's something that should not go out of the agenda, should be a continuous discussion. We can make predictions. There are challenges and threats. You're saying like, this is like kind of like very bold action of Russia. And this regional cooperation in this project actually bring values through the fact that together you can see this action. You can see what is happening. You can have like immediate vision and also to propose policies, but also, just to draw attention of the dangers in the Black Sea countries. That is for me, so I don't want actually to enter too much into discussion because we have all the specialists at the table. Again, I'm really glad that you invited me to this. Please take a look, like for all the participants, check like our website because we have new calls for proposals. One of our aims is strengthening the regional cooperation. And what this project is doing actually is to draw attention on a very hot topic on the international agenda, regional and international agenda, but also strengthening the regional cooperation. So I think it's an extremely good combination of two objectives that we have in our objectives in the Black Sea Trust for Regional Cooperation. So looking forward to listening to discussions. Thank you for all the guests being here and also all the participants in the webinar.
Thank you very much, Monica. And we go over to the presentation of our deliverables within the framework of the project. The project title was Facilitating Safety in the Black Sea region through involvement of non-governmental stakeholders, and during the year we have been inviting experts from the Black Sea region for monitoring and evaluation of the situation. They were preparing articles to be published in Black Sea Security. This is our journal, and we were informed on the results of monitoring in the form of policy debriefing, and we have now our deliverables for over a year of the project's implementation that I'm going to present, and they have already been published on the website of the Center Strategy 21, Center for Global Studies. This is our new website, which I'm going to show you right away, and you can see that our analytical paper, our policy paper on trends of the security situation in the Black Sea is freely available. And if we try to present our deliverables in a concise manner, let me open my presentation. We tried not to make it a big analytical paper, but make it rather very focused, because you can find all the details in our publication, in our journal, and in our analytical papers. We wanted to make it as concise as possible for the governmental officials responsible for Black Sea security, our diplomatic missions, and embassy workers could have a quick look and promptly find the necessary information. We have a number of the sections. This is overall assessment of the security situation in the Black Sea region. Second one, challenges. And the third one, recommendations. We have stated that the situation in the Black Sea region is not improving and have given the indications or the indicators of the aggravation, and that the Russian Federation is the main source of threats. Russia has gained almost entire control of the eastern sector and is continuing occupation of the Kerch Strait and the Azov Sea, and is seeking ways to strengthen its impact, its influence in the western part of the Black Sea, practically pushing out the competitors. And it's conducting drills both of the Black Sea Fleet and also its aerospace, and they call it aerospace forces, in order to continue its aggressive policy. And we would like to outline that at the background of discrepancies with Russia and increasing prices for oil and internal corruption, the Kremlin, this background, has a vision that the safety strategy or the way out is in broadening aggression against Belarus, Ukraine, and Baltic countries, in militarization of Moldova, or separation of the northern part of Kazakhstan, possible provocative actions in the Caucasus region. But in any case, pacification or capitulation to Russia will only give fuel to the fire. And the objective of Russia is to impose their perception that Black Sea is the zone of influence of Russia, and therefore Russia is conducting continuous destabilization at the east of Ukraine, is trying to close off regions for the drills, as it happened, as Mr. Mykhailo Gonchar has said during the Sea Breeze 2020, is creating restricted areas, anti-access or area denial, and is trying to project its force to the Mediterranean, which is not, on our opinion, a direct objective of Russia, but it's trying to create a platform to proceed to the West. Numerous unregulated conflicts in the Black Sea area are a threat to the Black Sea countries and are a tool for Kremlin. In the military sphere, I will not go into detail because there are other speakers, but of course it's militarization of the region and strengthening of the Russian military forces and fleet. And Russia is actively strengthening its control means over the waters of and underwater areas, including underwater robotic surveillance systems. Navigation safety will be disclosed by our colleague, but also Russia is limiting transit through the Azov Sea. In particular, it's restricting, like for 5 hours, the transition through the Kerch Strait due to transportation of military cargoes through the bridge, and also closed zones. Economic sphere. Russia's actions have led to major losses suffered by Ukrainian and foreign navigation companies, which have been forced to transition to a 4-day week. And these are great losses, and it deteriorates the economic situation in the Black Sea area. So Russia is trying to instill chaos and implement its aggressive plans. Our colleague will disclose the energy sphere, but I will just say a couple of words. In the energy sphere, it's characteristic that the countries are energy dependent, and in particular, it relates to Bulgaria. Productive activities of Gazprom and other Russia's energy companies at the Black Sea markets leads to the fact that they are ruining the market economy, and the EU association agreement regulations, and impose its own rules to be dictated out of Kremlin. Russia's energy projects are proceeding, and the Turkish stream is continuing. And due to that, Ukraine has lost the southern direction of its gas transit to Bulgaria and Turkey and some other Balkan countries. Informational and cybersphere, we have got accustomed to cyber attacks. It's not that impressive as a couple of years ago, but if you monitor the cyberspace, there are continuous cyber attacks on state institutions, non-governmental institutions, and state websites. Last year, we have indicated spoofing attacks on navigation systems, which led to improper data in the navigation system, which has caused negative effects on navigation. And in the information sphere, Russia is continuing fake news, and what is dangerous is that Russia is trying to undermine from within using media resources in the Black Sea countries, not only its traditional, Russia today. And I asked Mr. Babin to disclose the next topic, which is international legal war. And Russia is trying to make its national legislation dominate over international law. It's trying to violate international law and distort international practices. In the field of human rights, Maria, thank you for joining. We have been constantly monitoring and informing the society on violations of the Russian occupational authorities, on the hostages of Kremlin, and decisions to close, for example, churches, and to replace the population, trying to import or stimulate people to come from Russia, and create the conditions so that unloyal residents leave the peninsula, trying to finally replace it with Russian population. And in the policy brief, there are recommendations and proposals, and you can learn about the deliverables of the Sea Expert platform coordinated by Mr. Andrii Klymenko. Our center has become an active contributor. And there are direct and detailed recommendations on improving safety in the Black Sea region, in particular monitoring of monitoring of adherence to the sanctions imposed on Russia, introduction of new sanctions against Russia for brutal violation of human rights, abstaining from realization of joint infrastructural projects with Russia, joint naval and aerial patrols of the key trade ship routes in the Black Sea area, and focusing the attention of the international community on the occupation of the Crimea and etc. And I would like to give the floor to the moderator of our discussion, Deputy Director of our Center for Army Conversion and Disarmament, Mr. Mykhailo Samus. Thank you, Vitalii. I think that our discussion today will be very professional and interesting. Can you hear me? Hello again, everybody. Thank you very much for the invitation to participate in this event. The composition of speakers not just gives me hope that the discussion will be very interesting in a professional manner, but it's also a guarantee that we are not just going to, point out some trends, but also can elaborate certain recommendations and proposals. I would like to thank to the Center of Strategic Studies for the recommendations. You have conducted a comprehensive analysis of the situation as a Center of Global Studies, and I think that you have outlined all the possible threats and challenges existing in the Black Sea region and caused by the Russian Federation. What I wanted to add, we are more specialized in the military sector. So according to my professional deformation, I would like to outline this aspect. In fact, the situation is not just threatening or worrying. It's a disaster. It's a catastrophe. I would like to go back to what Mykhailo Gonchar has said, because the threats on behalf of the Kremlin government, threats demonstrated to a NATO ship, it's an evidence of the attitude of Russia to the international sea law, to the international law in general, and Russia is trying to rule by force. And if we compare it to the actions of Ukraine and NATO in this situation, I would call the counteraction insufficient. The balance of power between Ukraine and Russia in terms of Black Sea fleet is 15-1. It's a disastrous situation in the military sense. Regarding the rockets, Russia has around 200 working loads of rockets, so in one shot in the Crimea. So Russia is controlling the situation totally, and it's going to demonstratively, I think, increase its domination in the region, becoming more and more bold. And I think NATO is losing in the Black Sea because it lacks a strategy with clear roadmap how to implement steps in order to prevent a situation in 2 or 3 years when Russia will keep them out of certain naval routes or regions. I cannot see a clear counteraction, though NATO has the resources, but it's not happening. So I would like to address in particular the speakers in order to ask them to provide concrete proposals for a joint plan for Black Sea countries and non-Black Sea NATO countries to address this catastrophic situation. Within 1 or 2 years, there is no change, I think, unfortunately, in the Ukrainian maritime military forces. Unfortunately, we have lost this chance. I think we were going to have a very dynamic work now. So I would like to hear recommendations, and I would like to give the floor to the next speaker, and he will outline the situation in the Black Sea region and tell us what to expect from the Russian Federation. Andrii, Klymenko, the floor is yours. Hello, everybody. I would like to use this opportunity that we have a representative of the Black Sea Trust here and start my contribution with the following. 10 years ago, when the editorial board of BlackSeaNews was at its place of registration in Yalta, in the Crimea, we implemented a small project in this field with the Black Sea Trust. We were naive, but we were aware that there is a disruption in the region, and we are different countries with various policies, different policies, so diverging levels of democracy. And we tried to conduct an experiment whether we will be able to connect the Black Sea region at the level of municipalities. We tried to make a joint news feed of the Black Sea cities, like at the municipal level of Romania, Bulgaria, Turkey, Georgia, Ukraine, and Russia. And we didn't make it. We didn't make it because we received feedback only from the city of Bodik, and the others just were silent in spite of anything. And I think that today we can see that the result that we received then is an indicator of a major disruption or landslide in the Black Sea, in the mental sphere. And this disruption is creating and is going to create geopolitical, military, and other types of threats. And you need to put together the Black Sea region now, but in the new military and political context. Regarding the situation, I will say as follows. We assessed the probability of war this year according to our predictions, like 70 to 80%, definitely over 50. The time period that we envisage is the end of September and October, when a number of factors coincide. This is the active phase of concentration of all military forces of the Russian Federation in the Black Sea region, in the drill Caucasus 2020. And I'm sure we'll see that the military ships haven't participated in the military parade in Murmansk and St. Petersburg, are going to be transferred to the Black Sea region. A month or a month and a half is enough for them to relocate. And in October, there is a new risk factor being local elections, and we will see how at these local elections, pro-Russian forces in Ukraine, which are still here, will push the situation in the local communities, and these local communities will be mostly focused at the shore of the Black Sea and Azov Sea, and they will call to Putin for help. And in July, two new factors have emerged. The first one is the full-fledged railroad communication through the Kerch bridge with the Crimean Peninsula. Since it happened, I have been skeptical when I hear from our military guys that the composition of the Russian military contingent in the Crimea is not sufficient in order to attack Ukraine. After the military have received railroad communication using the Kerch Bridge, this situation can change overnight or in a couple of days. And Armyansk, Jankoy, Krasnoperekopsk can receive loads of Russian forces. And finally, in July, the nature of political regime in Russia has changed. Authoritarian democracy has been transferred to personal dictatorship. And there is a third factor that has emerged in July. It's the situation in Belarus. And I'm sure that Putin and his clique are now very scared by the fact that Batka's or Lukashenko's regime has managed to pacify the protests that are ongoing in Belarus. So how Putin is going to act it's a separate question, but we are aware that when dictators feel that their historical time is and their physical time is coming to an end, and this is aggravated by the economic and gas and oil crisis and pandemic phenomena, they have a little time left to implement their imperial ambitions and save their falling ratings among the population of the Russian Federation. I'm sure that we must be aware that the attraction to the Bosphore and Dardanelles Straits, this is sort of craziness in the genes of Russia, which has existed since the creation of the empire. And I wouldn't advise to our Turkish friends to be too relaxed, because this has not gone anywhere. So Mediterranean region should be alert. And finally, I would like to add to this situational analysis, and this was already mentioned by Mr. Mykhailo Gonchar. He mentioned the war of drills. This is unprecedented. I'm honestly surprised because the situations took place on the 21st and 22nd of July. And I'm astonished that there is no reaction at the moment, neither from the military command or other organs of NATO. And what happened last year? Last year, they were a bit ahead of the sea breeze drills, and they closed the region where the training was planned. Sea breeze had to close another region, but there was no overlap. this year, for the first time, at the beginning of the year, Russia created a situation which is called an overlap. So there is a military camp of our Ukrainian forces, and it was in a form of triangle, and they also overlapped with Russian forces. So the Russian forces had tried to overlap with the Ukrainian forces, and there was no reaction. And today's situation was very bold, and Sea Breeze has closed these regions that they wanted to use for their drills. In a week after that, Russia closed overlapping regions over these territories, and the international body which is responsible for this in this sphere, in NATO body in Spain, was aware that the region was closed, but they did not react. They failed to react. And if there is no reaction, and there were NATO ships and one Ukrainian ship, which have received these restrictions from Russia to NATO ships and one Ukrainian ship. And this requires an immediate and a very prompt reaction. And finally, the good news: not everything is that bad. One of the keynote events was the creation by our speakers, the creation of the Sea Expert platform, and we jointly have managed to put up this topic on top of the international agenda. And today, the dangerous situation in the Black Sea is spoken about in the European Parliament, European Commission, and external force. And if we deliver the message, then the threat is perceived. And if we're telling, look, people, we have to stop this because, rockets can reach London and Madrid, then they understand. American and NATO military men are also aware of that and are starting to say it aloud. And the Western analytical centers and think tanks have put it up on the agenda. What we as experts or journalists can do in this respect, we can just demand action, put up a message on threats, and disregard any allegations of panic. I myself like very much the proposals of the expert platform. We have like 10 people there who have been working very well and elaborated high quality documents, and we're sharing it as much as we can. And we need to bravely say aloud a couple of things. Our strategy, I'm sorry for stretching the agenda a little bit. Our strategy should be as follows, on my opinion. We must honestly and openly tell to the United States, covering the Black Sea with their Sixth Fleet and the NATO, which is very much too much bothered by the coronavirus threat, and reducing its presence in the Black Sea. No sound from Mr. Andrii. we should tell them, friends, cover up before we finish our forces, before we liberate, before we create our rocket shield. So within a year, 2 or 3, we need to control the Black Sea every day. There should be a NATO ship in there every day. Secondly, there is a big experience in the EU and NATO related to sea missions, for example, against smuggling of arms to Libya, etc. We need to create a military sea mission of the EU and NATO, or EU NATO plus other partners, and cover the Black Sea from Bosphorus to Odessa and to Batumi, so that the NATO flag can restrain further Russian aggression. And finally, look, we must start talking, and our colleagues should be aware. Albania has been a NATO member for many years. Do we think that Albania's military standards are better than Georgia's or Ukraine's? No, it was a political decision to accept one country to the NATO. And this political decision is different. And the last but not least, I was very much worried by the State Department's declaration on China, that the communist China is a new threat to the world. Now, if we, against this background, do not say that switching the world's attention to China will unchain Putin's hands in the Black Sea region. And if you, dear friends, switch to the Chinese waters, the World War III will start from the Black Sea with a very big probability. Thank you, Mr. Andrii, for this global approach and for your global view of the situation. Indeed, the question of NATO is quite a complicated one, and it's rather political if we're saying about standards. It's not about Ukraine or Georgia. We are in principle ready to become a member at any moment, and the question is rather different. And I call the NATO's approach in the Black Sea passive restraining or pacification. They are ready only to protect their members, not confronting, according to Article 5. And Russia is okay with this because Russia demonstrates its resoluteness against against Ukraine and Georgia, not the NATO countries. And another important question which has been mentioned is Russia's abuse of its right as a member of the international community, abuse of international law. And I would like to invite Mr. Borys Babin to join the discussion in order to outline this question. We have seen on the 25th of November 2017, when Russia has abused its right to block civil fleet and then conducted aggression against Ukraine. And we have seen the international community's reaction and NATO's reaction. And for me, the evidence was NATO's reaction to the situation. And I'm not surprised that there is no concrete reaction to the situation with Seabreeze and Russia's aggression against NATO ships. For me, it's not a surprise. Unfortunately, NATO lacks their strategy, which would differ from this passive retaining. Mr. Borys Babin, can you outline the situation of abuse of international law by Russia? Dear colleagues, I'm very grateful for this opportunity. Indeed, international law in this context should be measured not just by the words of the law, but also by the political context. Since the beginning of the conflict, Ukraine has demonstrated its resoluteness to protect its rights using international procedures, and usually international law is not a cure for all, but a means to protect the weaker. And it's better to protect own interests by suing the abuser in the international institutions. And the strategy that Ukraine has chosen related to addressing the respective courts, but the practice shows that our state apparatus is very vulnerable to the influence of the aggressor and to the business conducted with the state aggressor. Because the policy that Ukraine has been conducting is very much impacted by joint businesses with Russia in fishery, etc. And in these conditions, you cannot expect an absence of influence of Kremlin on our, for example, foreign ministry, etc. For conducting the proceedings, for managing the proceedings. An American company was selected by the Foreign Affairs Ministry that has started to process the big lawsuit within the framework of the international arbitration. And first of all, the negotiation stage was to be conducted. It was totally unpublic. In 2016, the court proceedings started. It was also not public. And neither Ukrainian scientists or even Western scientists were aware of the declarations and the Ukrainian position in them. And we could learn about it only from respective reports of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, even if they were not biased. Their level of international law awareness is really low. And I'm sorry for that. This is regarding the lawsuit 2017 regarding the Black Sea and Kerch Strait and Azov Sea. And after the publication of the positions of the parties, the arbitration has approved. But unfortunately, the position chosen by Ukraine has led to the fact that our country has not sustained a significant number of its positions in the case due to faulty strategy, because we have derived all our rights out of the sovereignty over the Crimea, not even thinking that it can be a subject of the court proceedings. And Russia, in a cynical but legally regular manner, has declared that Crimea is a subject of discrepancy between Russia and Ukraine. And Ukraine, in spite of a very high probability of Russia's position to question the status of the Crimea, has chosen to base its defense on the fact of sovereignty. And we, due to this faulty position, have lost a big percentage of gains in this lawsuit due to incompetence of the people having prepared this lawsuit and due to non-inclusion of Ukrainian experts, which could be explained, but also Western experts, because only one company was involved. Because Russia, for example, is working as a consortium in this sphere. They invite several companies and also scientists in order to have cross checks. So in this case, should we manage to receive certain resolution in our favor, it would be good. And the key risks that I can see in this case are the risks of Azov, because we have not resolved the situation with the internal waters of the Azov Sea and the Nation and territorial waters and bilateral agreement on friendship with Russia and joint use of these waters and the joint distribution of fish deposits. So in this context, when we're telling one thing and are signing another and are delivering a third one in court, winning the case in court is, from the legal point of view, very, very hard. And the team of lawyers from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs working on this has remained, though the main curator, the person having signed the documents, is not there anymore. So the big guy is not there. But now there is a question: who is doing that? Who is responsible for that? Who is coordinating, whether it's security service or the state fishery service, the state maritime administration, the state prosecutor's office? Who is coordinating this? And I am coordinating the collection of evidence, but I have not heard from anybody in a year. My impression is that this case has been abandoned. Another case is more narrow. It is regarding the seizure of Ukrainian ships. It's number 19-27. It was launched due to a big civil society pressure and expert pressure on the government. And the government was not willing to launch this case, but it started in 2019 in January, as far as I remember. And it's different in a following way, because Russia has committed specific violations against specific ships, and we have asked the international arbitration to impose a prevention measure in order to free the crews, and then the case will be reviewed. So this is a complex case of several elements. So the first case has been won by us, and this is by God's mercy, I think, given the position that we had. We are right in this position in terms of the convention, but there are certain legal aspects like jurisdiction, etc., and the international tribunal is, interpreting the spirit of the law and not the letter. And we have managed to receive this decision, and it's evidential that Russia, in spite of all these, speculations and delays, they have implemented this resolution. The second stage is a tacit stage, which is going to continue for a couple of years, and it's the stage of arbitration. And because there are no political prisoners in the Russian prisons, the chance that the international authorities will look at the provisions of the law, the letters of the law, and this imposes certain pressure on who is doing that, whoever is doing that, and it's this same company which is collecting evidence, etc. And I personally am not aware who is responsible for this case and what Ukrainian position, what Ukraine is going to impose it as its position. So, in spite of every legal ground to protect our interest, what I have just said is really an indicator of the fact that we're not just losing the war, but we're losing the war where we can win. We're losing due to corruption, due to Russian influence on the public sector, and due to faults in our public administration and the sector. Are there any ways out? Probably we can dissolve this sad picture by claims of certain persons to international institutions based on the maritime law. Uh, we can say about probability of certain investment disputes successes, the companies that have lost their property in the Crimea. Uh, so certain fishing companies and shipping companies can win cases uh, against Russia and its policy in the Black and Azov Sea. And I do not expect a quick resolution. But probably the Court of Human Rights and the European Court will give us certain hope. But without changing the players in the Mikhailovska square, I'm not telling about the minister, it's not their mandate. I mean the people who are responsible for the international maritime law in the ministry, and there is none. Nobody is doing that in the ministry at the moment. If not, we will lose. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Babin. You have raised a number of essential political questions. It's not only in the legal sphere, but also in certain other spheres, there is no coordination and responsibility for a specific project, both in the military industry sphere. We have now a new vice prime minister on that, and also in the military sphere. It should happen at the state level. And another question that you have raised is that we're losing not just the military aspect, but also the legal aspect. Mr. Yury Fedorov, I would like to switch to Russian. Yury Fedorov is an author of 2 books that we have published together. One of them is Hybrid War a la Rus, where he describes in detail how Russia is conducting their war in various spheres, in military, information, energy, and legal sphere. And as the second book, which is very relevant now, is called Russia, Fascism or Disruption. It was written in 2017, but then we are witnessing its practical implementation, where Russia has switched to fascism after they have frozen the immortal Putin. And we can have hopes to see the second option, so the dissolution of the empire. Mr. Fedorov, I would like to ask you for your opinion on the military situation and to give us a bird's view. The floor is yours. Please unmute your microphone. Can you hear me? Thank you, Mykhailo, for your kind words and presentation. Regarding the fact that Russia, in my opinion, is at the brink of disruption and the brink of dissolution. And these collapse trends have been more intensive than we had predicted like 2 or 3 years ago. We're not yet where the consequences of this short scenario of Russia's collapse. But we shall see how it goes in the Far East. It can be much faster and in a different form. Different from what we had expected. But let's go back to the Black Sea and the Black Sea Basin. And the question of military threats haven't emerged here. My colleagues have rightfully mentioned that the key threat existing in this region is Russia's politics and Russia's armed forces. But in order to more specific, to have a closer look at these problems and predict the form of Russia's military threat and potential conflicts, we need to go back to the composition and dislocation of the Russian military forces. Probably any military officer would tell that the indicators of dislocation, and this is true for any military service. So these positions reflect the military plans of the country, whether it is planning an aggression or protection. And however, the difference is very tiny, but it exists. And if we understand what kind of war the state is preparing for, we can predict the political objectives of the state. If we have a look at Russia's military forces concentrated in the Black Sea Basin, these are the forces of the Russian military dislocation. And if we believe Russia's official information, it's the second after the Western one, but they have many times mentioned, at least at the meetings, at least in the Russia's official sources, the new types of arms are directed to the southern military district or command region, which poses a question regarding the objectives of these actions and potential enemies. And it's hard to approximately assess the military power of the southern command region. But according to approximate estimations, they have around 2,300 armed vehicles, 275 units of aircraft, and it's quite approximate because Russian sources are not very specific on that. The standard armament of military unit is not disclosed, but if we know the structure and the number of brigades, we can approximately assess the level of arms, and it's quite a complicated concentration of military forces, which is exceeding comparable units of military forces of Black Sea states. And I think that very approximately we can reasonably suppose that the personnel or the manpower of the southern military district is equal to the entire Ukrainian armed forces. Regarding the objectives of these units, we should look at their structure. I think that the 8th Army is representative in this case, being comprised of, for example, the 150 division, which is located, it was experimental and is located next to Ukrainian border. It is meant for assault operation. And we should also include in the composition of this army 2 army units that are located at the occupied territories of Donetsk and Lugansk regions. These are 2 powerful military units, which, according to the most recent data published in Ukraine, is, if I understand correctly, they have from 300 to 400 tanks, and these forces are meant for waging a war with Ukraine. There are no other obvious goals for this army and 2 military units being operatively subordinated to the Chief of Staff of the 8th Army. And if we have a look at the eastern part of the Northern Caucasus, you can see that the 58th Army is located there, which is meant for military operations against Georgia, first of all. And I would like to say that there are 2 Russian military bases which are approximately equal to 1 brigade, situated in Abkhazian and Southern Ossetian Republic. These forces, the 58th Army of the 58th Army, are meant for conducting operations against Georgia. And there is a second row, which is a second row of defense, which is used for strengthening the armies that I have just mentioned. If we have a closer look at the dislocation, we can imagine that the key task of these forces are blitzkrieg-like operations in order to inflict maximum damage as soon as possible. The fourth group is located in the occupied Crimean Peninsula, and they obviously have 3 tasks based on their composition. First is conducting assault operations against Ukraine, and it's much spoken about in the last months on the probable breakthrough of Russian forces through the North Perikop in order to ensure the water supply from Kakhovka water basin, because Russia has practically caused a collapse of water supply in Crimea. Another task is operation type 2A/AD, so access denial operations. And I have mentioned that these forces are comprised of rocket onshore defense systems, are meant to impede the NATO ships, or are meant to ensure defense against Turkey. This is important because if we go back to 2008, Russia's war against Georgia, you can remember that it was stopped because a number of military ships of the United States have entered the Black Sea. It was declared that they are delivering humanitarian aid, but they also carried wing rockets, and it was a demonstration of force which has impacted the Kremlin, and the assault on Tbilisi was stopped. And in order to impede such developments in the future, Russia is creating this rocket potential for onshore brigades. Rocket potential and the caliber has been analyzed, which are carried on by submarines and on ships. Consequently, we have 4 Russian groupings meant for the one strategic objective, to conduct prompt military operations in the form of blitzkrieg in order to ensure maximum damage to potential adversaries, and after that to dictate political conditions for regulating in order to improve Russian position. And I'm a bit out of time, but I cannot but mention the scenarios. One of the Russia scenarios, and I do not exclude this probability, is a war against Ukraine. It will most probably start from small operations in a small scale at the north of the Crimea, and then grow and expand to the east of Ukraine and encompass the entire south and eastern region. The second scenario that we can see, and which is rather relevant, is a clash between Russia and Turkey. We know that two days ago, Azerbaijani and Turkish forces started joint drills. It's an escalation of the military conflict having emerged on the 12th of July between Azerbaijan and Armenia, which can result in a military clash with Russia. And it's important to point out that Russia's military base, number 102 in Yerevan, is not able to sustain a Turkish strike or the 9th military corps and joint forces. And in this case, if this takes place, Russia's loss of this war is inevitable, and the conflict may escalate to a nuclear stage or to a maritime scenario. Unfortunately, I'm out of time, and I would like to go back to where I started. Unfortunately, today the situation is that Russian policy and Russian military forces implementing this uh, policy has created a military base in the Black Sea area, which can outgrow the geographical borders of this region. And I cannot predict what happens next. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Yury, for this profound analysis. And for shifting the accent to the east and to the Caucasus, and we will discuss it a bit later. And I wanted to address our team in order to shift the accents from purely military ones to the humanitarian aspect, because Russia is deliberately ruining the reality starting from 2014 and starting to replace it with a new reality. And Russia is creating medieval approaches to international law and human rights, and any achievement of the humanity of the 21st century. I would like to give the floor to my colleagues and hear their opinions on the developments in the Black Sea region in the humanitarian sphere. Maria, the floor is yours. Hello, dear colleagues. Thank you for the invitation and for giving me this opportunity. I would like to show a number of slides to illustrate what I'm going to say. First and foremost, I suppose that we're going to have an English language discussion. So I have my slides in English, but in order to, be sustainable, I will speak in Ukrainian. I think that two important aspects are high on the agenda. First of all, that we're discussing the Crimea in terms of humanitarian and security situation, but I think that the humanitarian dimension is underestimated at times in terms of security aspects. And this is the attention that we're seeking at the international arena. And it's important to speak about the Crimea in a global or at least a regional dimension, because one of the problems that we're tackling when we're conducting advocacy at the international level is the perception of Crimea as an internal, the worst case, or a local problem. We need to stress on the geopolitical dimension of this problem, and in particular human rights. I was trying to attach the human rights problematic to the security dimension, and at the beginning of our event today, the colleagues have outlined a number of key areas. Probably I will repeat in a way. The first story to be told is a violation of human rights that have been taking place in the Crimea starting from 2014. For Ukraine, it's an unprecedented story. We have faced major violations after 2014, which are really unprecedented. These are persecutions and torture and forced abduction, etc. And in the Crimea, they have certain specific features, but these violations are large in scale, and political persecutions, as we define them, are in place. I wouldn't stop on the definitions because there are a lot of discussions, and it's not about the definitions, but it's about the the estimated number of 100 Ukrainian citizens being illegally detained in the Crimea. They are forcefully kept at the territory of Russian Federation, and they are under court proceedings or in prison. And for the security context, it's important to mention that most of these people are persecuted as terrorists, let's say. It's an abuse of the anti-terrorism Russian legislation, which creates a manipulative situation when accents are shifted from potential terrorist threats to using anti-terrorist provisions of the law to persecute the Crimean Tatars. And the second aspect, and it's rather an intricate story, which calls for more research, and this is the way how these cases impact the narrative and facilitate Russia to, have a ground for occupation. Because Sentsov's case, if you look at the fabula of the case, there is a clear indication that Ukraine sent its agents to Russia to conduct terrorist acts in the Crimea, and Russia saved the Crimea by annexing it. And we need to mention also the case of the colleagues, Mr. Mykhailo Gonchar, and the example of Mikhailo Shtiblikov, Vladimir Dudkin, and others. Unfortunately, only even after the conviction, they are still under oppression. And Mr. Basarabov is being pushed already after his conviction, being 14 years as a terrorist. And there are fines and incarceration that are among the threats. So terrorists are Ukrainian citizens at the territory of Crimea and not the aggressor country. So within the framework of this information war, it's a very important aspect, and we should look at these persecutions not just in the humanitarian context. Another important factor is colonization and changing of the demographic composition of the Crimea. This question has been researched by the Ukrainian Helsinki Union, and we do not have exact figures. We strive to approximate our calculation. If we're talking about pushing out the less loyal population from the Crimea by using political persecution, we can speak about 74,400 persons. And if we're talking about the inflow, it's over 172,000. And these are both military and civilian types of population. And the biggest estimation is 300 persons. So this significantly complicates the process of deoccupation and also impacts the security situation in general. Another factor is militarization of the Crimea. in terms of the humanitarian dimension. And we are referring to the Crimean Human Rights Group and Human Rights Watch, saying that from 2015 to 2019, about 19,000 Crimeans have been conscripted to the Russian army. And we stress on the fact that this Crimean problematics should be put in the global context. And there was information that people conscripted, Ukrainian citizens conscripted at the territory of Crimea to the Russian army are participating in the Syrian war, which is a clear signal for the international community. This is a part of the hybrid war, this distortion of consciousness, and training the citizens of Ukraine to be part of the Russian army. Other factors related to the humanitarian situation are, of course, environmental situation. Of course, we lack a comprehensive study on this matter and evaluation by Ukrainian state institutions from a more bird's view. We lack a global study. However, we can look at the Armansk disaster, the Tavrida High War, and the Kerch Bridge. You can imagine that the environmental problems created are impacting the entire region. It's not a problem of Ukraine, it's a problem of the Black Sea region. Also challenges related to the coronavirus, COVID-19. We have been monitoring the situation, and the key problem is that the Crimea is inaccessible for the international community. So any international organization cannot say that the situation is being controlled, and we cannot trust the figures provided by the local government. Another problem is the problem of water resources, and according to the Ukrainian declarations, in order to satisfy the needs for water, the water resources are enough, but the occupational forces are using these resources according to their priorities, and it creates threats. And I wanted to add on my behalf regarding the visions and recommendations, which could logically be added to a summary document. I think that initiatives related to similar research on the impact of the Crimean situation on the regions of the country is really essential, and it's important that it happens in the regional format. And I think that similar developments are relevant for the humanitarian situation. We support the recommendation of sanctioning the Russian Federation, both in the form of personal sanctions for violating human rights. Probably there will be political will to impose sanctions in the regional format due to the threats created to the region in terms of security. Also, recently, Ukrainian government has voiced this idea at the level of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and also the Ministry of Reintegration. Has proposed creating international coalition on the occupation of the Crimea, and unfortunately it remains a very complicated task, but we can see a huge need to receive this information and to keep the topic of Crimea high on the agenda. Probably at the level of the Black Sea region, this idea will be launched by the government, and the circle of participants can be broadened to include more countries. And of course, it is important for us to involve more countries with a proactive position. If you remember, there was a story regarding involvement of Turkey in the negotiations in 2017, when two Ukrainian citizens were freed from illegal detention. But at the level of political statements or potential humanitarian programs, this is also feasible. Probably the potential of such a regional format is underestimated. In order to support Ukrainian citizens in the Crimea, or at least voice a position. That's it on my side. Thank you, Maria. You have raised an important question because, on my opinion, the developments in the Crimea is a model of Russia's strategy as a medieval force these days, and the reaction of the modern international community. At least it calls itself modern. And we can see what the reaction is on behalf of the European Union, our Western partners. And I think that our proactive position, and especially the proactive position of the European Union and the US, are quite essential, because Russia can see how its brutal violations are responded to, violations of the international law, violations of human rights, etc. And Russia is continuing to transform the Crimea into a medieval territory, because if you remember what the Crimea was before 2014, it was a zone for cultural exchange and demilitarized zone for development of business, economics, etc. But now the Black Sea has transformed into a military space. So the reaction of the international community play a key role here. And I wanted to go over to the traditional activity of our center. This is energy aspect of hybrid war, in particular Russia's war in the Black Sea region. And I would like to give the floor to Mr. Igor Stukalenko to outline the strategies of Russia, which are a threat of the Black Sea region, to the Black Sea region, but not limited to it, and have a global impact. Mr. Igor, the floor is yours. Thank you, Mykhailo. I would like to immediately support your idea about the need for coordination, for joint action, also in the energy sphere, and it's no less important in this one. And experience shows that only in this manner we can counteract the threats which are common for the entire region. I just wanted to start from a piece of positive news, in particular from the fact that the entire Black Sea region are in one very good community called energy community, or the community. And you can see it on the map. practically all the countries denoted by the blue color are European Union. The yellow countries are members of the energy community, and brown colored countries are countries of associated community, association countries of the energy community. I will remind you a preamble of the Treaty on Energy Community. I quote, "The parties have resolved to create an energy community in order to increase the trustworthiness of energy supply within the energy community by introducing regulatory systems that are necessary from the point of view of the region." And this treaty was concluded back in 2005, and now we can draw some conclusions on its impact. If we have a second look on the map, you can see that practically all Black Sea countries are within the energy community, all but one. That's where this threat comes from. So, safety of supply within a regulatory area is the basis. Dependence, problems, and threats do exist. Imported oil and gas remains very high. First of all, due to monopoly supply of natural gas from the Russian Federation. Russia continues its categoric attempts to exclude Ukraine from the chain of supply of gas to the EU using the same methods. Misuse of gas transportation infrastructure, ignoring the EU energy legislation, creating gas crisis, trying to impose responsibility on other countries. Another project has been launched starting from this year is the Turkish Stream. Whether it impacts the energy safety of the countries of the region is rather rhetorical, because Turkish Stream delivers the same volume of Russia's gas, but using a different route. So the capacities that could resolve the same problem are now vacant. On the 3rd of July, when the Turkish flow was stopped for maintenance, which is a regular practice for such a pipeline, the Balkan route has secured the uninterrupted supply. And I will remind you that they used a gas metering station at the border of Romania. The transit was increased to 4 million cubic meters. And this is another evidence that all the countries should look at, in particular those who have supported the Turkish Stream. And this is the evidence that dependence on the Turkish Stream poses a huge threat. Why Gazprom's activities and other Russia's companies in the region can be viewed as a threat? In 2012, just reminding, in 2012, the European Commission conducted a large-scale research regarding the actions of the Russian monopolist in Europe. By having opened a case against Gazprom. Gazprom was accused of unfair practices and domination, abusing of monopoly power on the market by violating the articles on the functioning of the European Union. The Commission in 3 years has proved that Gazprom is restricting competition at the gas supply market in Bulgaria and in other 7 member states, and is developing the unfair price policies and unfair practices. It was clearly indicated that the supply of Russian gas was connected to investment or strengthening Gazprom's control over the gas infrastructure of the EU countries. The Commission has de facto confirmed that Gazprom is motivated to provide higher prices to member states like Bulgaria. This was a critical document, but there were no fines imposed. Whether it has changed the behavior of Gazprom, unfortunately not. We clearly understand that in Ukraine, the Gazprom politics is repeated, and in some cases, it's even more intensive. In 2019, Naftogaz has submitted a lawsuit to the European Commission on the monopoly situation of Gazprom, and we were waiting for uncontrolled actions of Russia. This claim was also stressing the potential deterioration of the Ukrainian gas transportation system, which can be caused by the construction of Nord Stream or Turkish Stream gas pipelines. How do we tackle this challenge? Again, coordinated action is required, but first and foremost, strengthening the connections between the gas networks of the countries in the region. And these are actions that ensure safety of supply and ultimately positively impact the consumer. There are external suppliers providing 75% of gas supplies in Europe. The energy community has introduced a special transparency form, the so-called Klima, which enables to track the status of a project at the level of EU. For example, in SOC transparency platform. At the same time, the availability of various plans demonstrate that the functioning and development of the infrastructure requires coordination. And only in this case, it can strengthen security and there is room for development. LNG infrastructure. The availability of such infrastructure, of course, ensures access to the world market of liquefied gas, which is more transparent, which ensures energy safety. Now we can see that in Europe, there are over 20 LNG terminals, but EU strategy of development envisages ensuring access to all the member states. The energy community, in the same manner, supports this idea And recently we have discussed this matter. Among the joint interest projects, so-called, having been developed in the energy community and the European Union, there are two projects that we are especially interested in. These are LNG terminals, which will be acting on the basis of FSRU and the Great School of Alexandrovsk. Their implementation will take place in the nearest future, and it will give us access, in particular also to Ukraine and other countries, to regasified LNG. And based on the experience of Lithuanian colleagues, access to LNG usually strengthens negotiating positions with Russia. From the 1st of January 2020, an important development has taken place. I would like to focus your attention on the fact that the operator of the gas transmission system in Ukraine was certified as a European operator. And secondly, what I really enjoy saying is that the gas transportation system of Ukraine at the border with the EU, you can see that Uzhgorod and Kapushani interconnections, and also the connection points with Hungary and Romania, now lacks representatives of Gazprom Export. It's a huge development which practically has overhauled the gas transportation services market in Europe and given big advantages. In particular, relations with the Russian monopolists are now regulated by the European gas law. This enabled us to unblock transport capacities blocked by Gazprom, having been blocked by many years, and has opened perspectives for infrastructural services to European countries. What the press would call transferring the connection points to the western border. So creation of virtual connection points at the border. Besides, it enabled us, and this is a fact, to conduct first transit of gas between EU countries using Ukrainian transportation system, and also to conduct virtual transit. This has significantly impacted the situation and enabled Ukraine to become a part of the EU. It's a fact. The market has become very much more, and it's strengthened energy security, but threats and risks are present. In particular for Moldova, Igor, I'm very sorry, there is 1 minute left. Okay, I will try to round up. Moldova is party to the Energy Community Treaty, but at the same time, Moldova is part of the Eurasian Economic Union. This is a union under the aegis of Russia, which will use special principles of gas transportation imposed by Russia. And it means that Moldova is related also to Russia and Gazprom. This double vector policy is not favorable for integration. After the introduction of the Turkish stream. Gazprom stopped transit through Trans-Balkan stream through the territory of Moldova, and it was a disaster for Moldova. The tariff was increased by 8 times, besides not receiving revenues for transportation. So the decision that has deprived Moldova from transit revenues. So the decision maker was Gazprom, which owns Moldova's state gas Moldova's monopolist gas company, and Moldova is therefore paying a very high price for the gas. So there are threats, of course. Just to round up, I would like to say that we should elaborate a joint response using the instruments of European Energy Community and the Association Agreement. Counteraction to threats should be coordinated and multilateral. Only in this case we can avoid threats posed by monopoly position of the supplier. In more detail, this information is available in Black Sea Security on our website and in the publication. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Igor. Thank you very much. Indeed, in the energy sphere, the situation is the best in terms of counteracting Russian aggression. And this is clearly evident because we have coordination at the level of the European Union, and also the active contribution of the United States. And should the situation be the same in other aspects of Russia's aggression, like in the military sphere, our general results would be much better. I would like to give the floor to Gela Vasadze in order to ask him to tell about his estimations of the situation in the Caucasus. Mr. Fedorov has already tackled the situation in Caucasus and what happens now. What is the trend and the general picture now? What are the aspects that you would like to outline in more detail? The only thing is we have little time left. I would like to ask you to squeeze in 7 minutes in order to zoom out of the situation in an efficient manner. Thank you very much, dear friends. Thank you for the invitation. It was very interesting to hear all the contributions on how the situation in Caucasus is interrelated with the situation in Ukraine and the Black Sea region. You cannot separate these components. So there is a huge probability of threats to Europe and Asia, as the Alexander the Great has attempted to conquer Russia, and also the Ottoman Empire has attempted to dominate the world, in fact. But anyway, we should be more specific, because when we're speaking about, and you know that what the role of Congress in the United States is, and specific messages, there is a narrative that were not interesting for them, but now it's not the case. In the geopolitical revisionism of Putin and his team is focused on the Black Sea region, but another thing is that the Russian Federation has less than 10% of the Black Sea Aquatoria. The annexation of the Crimea and Abkhazia has provided 670 kilometers, 1,000 kilometers more of the Black Sea coastal line. And let's have a look on the Russia's presence in the region. We need to demonstrate that Moscow, in this respect, is acting not just in a military manner, but also in a hybrid manner where the military component is not the key one. For example, Georgia lacks a deep water seaport. There is Batumi and Poti, but they're not deep water, and it's high on the agenda since it has been high on the agenda since 2010. There were a lot of there were a lot of volunteers, but Americans said that it was impeding their interests. So the current government of Georgia, the Georgian Dream, has come to power, and they have blocked this project. There were litigations, and the government has stamped a new court resolution. And now the destiny of this port is really unknown. Anaklia, where the port should be situated, is important not just in the economic manner, because and the economic component is significant because of the container shipments, which have been constantly growing and are going to grow later. But it can also serve as a NATO military base, which would disclose the Russia's monopoly in the eastern part of the Black Sea. So, of course, it was not welcome, and the government of Georgia, either voluntarily or not, probably they were afraid to contradict Russia, and they have blocked it. A company having worked in Georgia starting from 1997 has declared that Georgia has significant deposits of shale gas. And this company was called Frontera, and it was blocked by court litigations, and it has lost an arbitration case. Only two requirements were satisfied by the court resolution, and the difference was $200,000 as a natural deposit tax. And this company was blocked, and the State Department of the United States has mentioned this as a big precedent. It's one of the major American investors, having invested over $500 million to Georgia, and this comedy is ongoing. In parallel, an Austrian company, OMB, will work on the deposits in the Black Sea. I will not mention who they are, but they are directly related to the Nord Stream 2. And Rosneft is doing that in the territorial waters of Georgia, I mean Abkhazia, so they are extracting oil there. The port is owned by the Kazakh national company, but there is terminal number 1 owned or rented by a citizen of Armenia, and according to American sources, Iranian smugglers used this platform. I'm sorry, we're a bit limited in time. I think that we have just a few minutes before the end of the Zoom session. Regarding the war of Armenia and Azerbaijan, there is a direct link that it was beneficial for Moscow, and it's the same about smuggling of weapons having impacted Georgian and Azerbaijani relations. Thank you. Thank you. I think that we would need much more time than 7 minutes for this. I give the floor to our last but not least speaker, Georgi Gisanov, who will give us a bird view from Romania. I think that Romania is our core ally in terms of Black Sea military and political aspects, and Ukraine has every possibility to jointly counteract threats with Romania and Russia's efforts to totally control Black Sea. And this is hampering both Romanian economic interests and Ukrainian ones, and is impeding communication and navigation. Georgi, the floor is yours. I would like to ask you to beg your pardon, you have only 5 minutes because we're limited in our timing on Zoom.
Hello, thank you for the invitation. I would like to start by saying that I share the views exposed previously by the rest of the speakers regarding Russia's prospects of dominating the Black Sea region militarily in the short term. I will concentrate on the military, economic and regional issues seen from the Romanian perspective. Right now, Romania is still committed, despite the pandemic and despite the subsequent economic crisis, is still committed to spending 2% on defense for the next for the foreseeable future, that is 2026. Unfortunately, right now, there are certain delays caused by litigations in some of the procurement projects that have started a few years ago. These delays have affected especially the Romanian Navy, who has most of all of its modernization programs and blocked by litigation at the moment. This year, Romania is set to receive its first Patriot system and also a small batch of F-16s from Portugal. On the other hand, the decision taken this week by the United States to withdraw 12,000 troops from Germany and part of them to be redeployed either in the on the eastern flank or simply withdraw them to the United States. It's not conducive to greater security in the Black Sea region, because it compromises the Atlantic link and German and US relations. This is basically a punishment against Germany. As a positive development in the military field, I think despite the pandemic, we've seen some of the most complex NATO exercises in the Black Sea, especially naval exercises, and I would like to emphasize Sea Breeze and the present and standing NATO maritime mine countermeasures group that is, I think, is one of the exercises taking place right now. Also, I would like to emphasize an exercise conducted solely by the Romanian Navy, the Sea Shield 20, that took place a couple of months ago. In terms of energy developments, the most important energy development in Romania over the past half year has been the withdrawal from an agreement with China General Electric for the development of units 3 and 4 of the Cernavoda nuclear plant, as well as the modernization of unit number 1. However, I must stress that the cost of this project is something like 9 billion euros, and the government is looking for a NATO or a European Union partner nation to develop this project. However, at the moment there are no public announcements regarding what company or with what state we will develop our nuclear energy program. Offshore drilling, unfortunately, has been delayed in the Black Sea because of the Romanian energy law that was passed last year. Last year, and Exxon has withdrawn from the project. Partially stemming from the adoption of this law. So unfortunately, until the current law is amended, I don't think there will be any developments in when it comes to offshore drilling for oil and gas in the Black Sea. That will have to wait after the Romanian general elections to see what will happen with this project, and this is a major blow to Romania's prospects as a energy hub in the Black Sea region. Regarding regional issues, the most important player from NATO in the Black Sea is Turkey, and unfortunately, its policy will bring her more or less in the near future in conflict with Western interests, either in the Mediterranean or in Syria, and this will probably reflect on its cooperation within NATO. Regarding Romanian and Ukrainian bilateral relations, Romania views Ukraine as a key state when it comes to its security. However, developing closer relations is hampered mostly by the minority issues, the minority rights issues in Ukraine, and the new administrative reorganization of Ukraine that has come into effect in the past month will affect the relationship, because it seems in the perception in Bucharest is that it affects the Romanian speaking minority. It's affected disproportionately. And regarding military cooperation in the Black Sea, we've seen some positive developments. However, as the other speakers have pointed out, there is no central strategy. There is no central idea. There is, and here I have to agree partially with President Macron regarding that NATO is somewhat brain dead. Yes, we lack an operational concept to deal with the Russian threat right now, and the Black Sea is unfortunately part of the problem. And regarding other vehicles of military cooperation in the Black Sea, especially naval cooperation, unfortunately, we have this Montreux Convention, and both Turkey and Russia are very attached to the Montreux Convention, and until the regime of the Straits is changed, the only presence that we may see is that will be military presence will be either troops deployed in Romania or Bulgaria, or aircraft also, fighter aircraft or maritime patrol aircraft. Thank you very much.
Дякую, Георгій, за вашу відверту і
Thank you, Georgi, for your openness and competence.
Thank you.
And your integrated assessment. I would like to give the floor for the final word to Monica Sakario. The floor is yours.
Yeah, so the only thing that I would say is like, it's been a brilliant discussion. Thank you for that. And you've painted like a rather dark picture of what is happening in the region. And actually the threat is real and it's here in various areas. And thank you for highlighting that. And from time to time, there is like this kind of spark, you know, there is kind of light coming from all of you, like in the energy sector, or maybe to push, you know, like the companies in lawsuit and actually to gain to have some small gains, actually to keep continuing doing that. You talked about not keeping on the like Crimea, for instance. Maria was saying that we should not keep it local. We have to make sure as civil society, as non-governmental actors, that actually all of you said that we should push that on international agenda. So I think that is something that we should keep in mind, like through joint actions, working together, maybe we can do something together to push it on international agenda, to push international organizations to react. So it's up to us. This is our role. This is the role of the civil society actually in this matter. So thank you again. I'll not keep it too much because it's been, I know it's almost at the end. So, and what can I say? We're looking forward to receiving proposals that actually to continue this this project, because it's, as I mentioned at the beginning, it's such an important topic and it's so hot and needs, you know, even like more joint forces and continuation of this. Yeah, that is from my side.
Пані Моніко, дуже дякую і
Thank you, Monica. And the final word goes to Mr. Gonchar as an organizer. Thank you. Well, my final word will be very concise in view of the lack of time. I would like to express my gratitude and invite everybody to share their materials and articles on the pages of Black Sea Security publication. And I share the view of Monica that though the picture in the Black Sea region is quite sad, but it's not hopeless, and essentially Russia is making a trap for the other countries, but it will get into this trap itself, as we can see in Belarus. So thank you everybody for your attention, for being together. And our corporate motto is Synergy Energies.